Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor. Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of our show, bringing you today another really fascinating guest involved in creating a better tomorrow. Today, we have the honor of being joined by Dr. Michael Ott, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Research and Development Officer at the Clorox Company. He assumed the role back in June 2022, and he's responsible for leading the organization's global research and development, as well as has responsibility for product development and innovation, from concept to commercialization. And he also oversees the company's stewardship activities in various technical capability areas. Dr. Ott is a sort of a Clorox veteran, has spent his entire career at Clorox supporting nearly every aspect of the business. Prior to this current assignment, he was Vice President of Research and Development for their specialty products, helping ultimately reset that business to creation of various innovation platforms, including those focused on the Fresh Step Outstretch cat litter, Glad bags with Clorox, and as well as the Hidden Valley line. During that time, he also served as the company's interim chief sustainability officer, ultimately working with various businesses to achieve the company's packaging and emission goals. Previously, Dr. Ott was the vice president of R&D for the Cleaning, International, and Clorox Pro divisions, and for more than a decade led initiatives resulting in really significant expansion of the company's home care and professional businesses. He started out as a bench scientist back in 1996 and ultimately moved to a product supply organization, global strategic sourcing team, before returning to R&D to help launch the company's open innovation capabilities. Dr. Ott also serves as a chair and chief volunteer officer of the board of directors for the Boys and Girls Club of Oakland, California, coaches Pop Warner Youth Football in West Oakland. He holds a PhD in chemistry from University of California, Santa Barbara, did his bachelor's in chemistry down the road here at Villanova University, and we're honored to have him with us today. Dr. Michael Ott, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today and talk for a little while.
Ira, it's my pleasure. Glad to be here with you.
It's great having you, Mike. I mean, I would love to start off, as we typically do, by handing you the floor for a little bit to talk about you, a little bit of your background, how you initially got interested in chemistry, of course, organic chemistry, and then also, second to that, and then I'll step back and let you go. Talk a little about your early work in natural products chemistry, because this is an area that I'm extremely passionate about. And when I was sort of Googling you, a bunch of papers and even a book chapter came up on, you synthesizing Taxol analogs and all sorts of other unique natural products back in the day. Take us down that path as well, if you would.
Well, yeah, great. First of all, I mean, I'd say I was always very curious growing up, a lot of different things. I played a lot of different sports. I read a lot of different kinds of books, had a sort of a great childhood outside the Washington, D.C. area in Maryland, which really, I remember just in high school, loving math and science. I mean, I played football. I was doing lots of different things. I was in the band. I was like experimenting with a lot of different things, but ultimately, when I was thinking about a major for college, I remember my dad saying to me, well, think about something you got an A in, and that was an easy A. Was kind of the lens that, my dad sort of, advised me on. And so I was like, okay, well, this one was a hard A, and this one was a B, and this one was a, and ultimately I was like, I remember doing organic chemistry and just thinking, why are we going so slow? Like we keep covering the same stuff. And it was more that I was getting the concepts, I think, quickly. And so, I just, a lot of times, another thing, I guess, Ira, is just, I've always had this mindset where nothing is irreversible, I guess. I've never been afraid to try something or put myself out there. And so I said, yeah, hey, OChem, let's try it, put it out there. I can always change it. Like, it's not the end of the world or something. If so I guess I'm a little easygoing that way, you could say. And so that's sort of the splash I had going into College of Villanova. Had a wonderful experience on the main line in Philly. And going to Kelly's and going to Barleycorns.
Oh yeah.
Now I'm talking 80s lingo. I don't know if you,
Oh yeah.
Campus Corner for cheesesteaks at midnight, all that. We got to the Elite Eight that I got there right after our first championship, against
Nice.
the Warriors. So really enjoyed the Villanova experience, but I also just love the science again. You know, I love the curriculum. I got into a lot of different things. Again, my curiosity took me to a lot of different, biochemistry and, PChem and all kinds of things like that. And ultimately, I was like, but organic chemistry again is, it's like those words from my dad a little bit, like, what'd you get an A and what was easiest? It's like, OChem to me was still the most logical of them all to me. It just sort of, I don't know, you could say, see the molecules. I mean, like,
Yep.
which sort of encouraged me, hey, I want to explore this more. And I had really grown up on the Northeast, and I had never been to California. And so I applied to all schools out in California, like sight unseen. I was like, I'm gonna go west, young man, and just check it out and use this time, and then I'll come back, right? And so I applied to all schools out west, and UC Santa Barbara with the number 3 ranked, OChem school at the time. I mean, it's still very highly ranked. I think we have 5 Nobel Prize winners there. And so ultimately, I accepted to go there, and just, I'd say it was a really magical experience for me. If, for those listening who have been to grad school, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, really immersing yourself in sort of a single area and becoming like the best in the world in, your small space, is a pretty intense experience and very rewarding. And it's like, the best of times and the worst of times. Just, the hardest thing I ever did, and probably the most rewarding thing, just, I worked for Professor Dan Little, who to this day, I go down to Santa Barbara and see him every year. I'm still in touch with him. And, just the relationships that you make and the science that you sort of bond over, and, you're teaching it, you're studying it, you're doing the research, you're writing papers, you're speaking at conferences. It's like an all-encompassing 24/7 gig, grad school, sort of a labor of love or torturous, you could say, but in the best possible way. So I loved working on Taxol. In the early 90s, there was a synthetic race to see who
Yep.
could make it first and save lives, if you remember back then. And
Oh yeah.
so we were right in there, and you giving papers and collaborating and doing biotests with some of our analogs, and seeing if you could make something more simpler, understanding the functional reactivities of the different groups and things like that, to simplify the process and still make it effectively. And it was a very exciting time to be a scientist. And so and then also just being in Santa Barbara too was is a magical place. So all that combined, I actually met my wife there, my future wife. And so it was a special time.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, I can, it's always interesting hearing about, chemists, working on sort of the toughest of the tough chemistries. And, obviously, as you experienced in that period, they plants like creating really impressive chemistry. So I take my hat off to
Yeah.
you too for that, because I do know people that were in that Taxol game as well. So that's, yeah,
And
no,
like,
that's,
yeah, totally geeking out to like, structure activity
oh,
relationships, right?
oh
Like
yeah,
you
oh yeah,
master group over here because it's so hard to synthesize that piece. Like, what if we put, just, a carbon chain there instead? Just,
yep,
oh man, it was a lot of fun.
absolutely. No, definitely. So yeah, Michael, you transitioned quite early after your PhD to Clorox. And before we get into some of the things that you've been doing and you continue to do now, I'd love to just start off with a little bit of the history that maybe folks listening and watching might not be aware of. And I enjoyed sort of going to the Clorox site and going into that sort of that historical timeline. And I thought, obviously when we hear the word Clorox, synonymously, bing, bleach pops up in the head. But Clorox much more nowadays, this diversified cleaning, home care, health and wellness company. But interestingly, looking at the timeline, founded in 1913, the company almost didn't make it to 1914, and has a really interesting sort of startup. If these venture capitalists, whatever they're called at the time, didn't come along, we might not have Clorox today. But talk a little bit about the history, if you would.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, we founded in 1913 in Oakland, California, right, which is where I live and where, Clorox is, still headquartered at. We're about 9,000 people. We're about a $7 billion company, more than 7 billion. Global, right, all around the world. The And you're right, we started out just as bleach, selling bleach, producing it in Oakland, and having glass bottles. And one of the big things that happened was during the Depression, we did not, everybody else was sort of diluting bleach and raising the price and things like that. And the Clorox company did not do that, right?
Yep.
So we are a very high value, highly principled, company. That's the culture of our company. In fact, our number one, we have, three values. And the first one, which has been with us for 100 years, is do the right thing. You don't see Clorox in the news with weird accounting practices or greenwashing or, like we are a very, very highly principled company, which is one of the reasons that I've been here so long and many of us have, right? And so it sort of started, in 1913 refusing to dilute the product, refusing to raise the prices, that sort of thing. And really, after the Depression, that was known by the public, and the public responded and really appreciated what Clorox did as a highly ethical company, and didn't. And so, and actually, you see that even with through the pandemic, right?
Right.
As sort of 100 years later, right? It's like, huge demand on the products, and all kinds of chaos going on. And, we did not raise prices. We did not, look to take advantage of the situation, always doing the right thing during the pandemic and things like that. So, we were kind of built out of that, like you're saying, from the bleach. And I'd say, it wasn't until, the 70s, 80s, where we started to expand, right? And we started to get into, food and cat, through acquisition, cat litter. We got into insecticides. We started growing our home care presence with the acquisition of, like Pine Sol, for example. At the end of the 1900s, we acquired First Brands, which was a very big acquisition. I was with the company at that time, and we grew 50% basically overnight. So we acquired Glad, for example, and
Mm-hmm.
some other brands, Glad being a billion-dollar brand itself. And so, so these acquisitions really sort of help fuel Clorox. We acquired Burt's Bees, into the
Yep.
2000s, Brita, things like that. And so, what I like to say now is, pound for pound, we ship more cat litter than we do bleach. I mean, bleach
Mm-hmm.
is not one of our, top top three businesses at this point in terms of volume or in terms of sales. We have, Glad is a very big global brand for us. The
Right.
Clorox equity is over a $2 billion brand. which is a lot bigger than, than just bleach. Bleach is a smaller portion of that.
Mm.
And, you look across, you can keep going into like, Hidden Valley. Our foods, division is also a very strong and profitable group, as is our, Brita and, our Kingsford charcoal, right? And now we're into pellets as well and things like
Sure.
that. So, we've expanded. We have 13 business units across Clorox. And, we have plenty of ways to drive scale across those as well.
Excellent. Excellent. I love hearing about multi-billion dollar product lines and things like that coming out of the
Yeah.
pharma industry, and especially in these different sort of these diversified segments. So it's exciting. Michael, one of the areas that you were actively involved in, I think this goes back about 15 years now to around 2008, was the development of Clorox's various green and eco product offerings. And I came across an article that you were interviewed in at the time, and you were sort of saying, look, this isn't just about putting a leaf on the bottle. There's a lot of sophisticated stuff that goes into creating these. Number one, you were looking for this Natural Products Association seal of approval, which basically, there shouldn't be anything in these bottles that isn't sort of, anything that my grandmother couldn't have made 100 years ago. At the same time, you pointed out in this article that, look, we got to think about, people care about what these things taste like and smell like, and if I take a shower and if it gets in my eyes, and so forth. Talk a little bit about, what it's like sort of creating green alternatives, and a little bit of sort of the innovation path that you were involved in at that period of time.
Yeah. Yeah, that was actually an incredible time, because we hit the trend. I want to say it was like 2008,
Mhm.
2007, that time frame. And we had just got a new CEO as well, Don Canals. And he, I think he looked across the portfolio and saw Greenworks and was like, let's go for this. So I remember, like we were on Oprah. I mean, Oprah was,
Yeah.
was like holding Greenworks in her hand, and like and Ellen and things like that. I mean, it was a really exciting time. And we were getting into a new segment every 6 months, with our Greenworks line. And and again, like, with the Clorox, highly, high values, high purpose driven, highly principled. It's like, we have to do this right.
Mhm.
We're not gonna. And I remember, I was leading that effort for our company, and wanting to, there was no standardization or certifications, a
Yeah.
little bit like the foods industry, but it's like, what's organic, what's this, and so I remember, we were like, hey, let's start a consortium. And so, I mean, I was cold calling companies. I won't name the companies, but I was cold calling all the companies that were basically in, marketing some green type products, cleaning products and stuff, trying to say, hey, let's all, let's get together and talk about what nonprofit we want to get behind, and then we can, or is it the EPA, or so we can you come together and start standardizing some of these things. And it
Mhm.
was super interesting. I read some of the phone calls where I call these companies and they'd be like, no, we're not green, and I'd be like, well, your title is green and you're making green claims, and they're like, no, people just think we are, but we're not.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to see who wanted to, get involved in this, and who could care less, and that sort of thing. But I think the companies that you can imagine were the ones that wanted to get involved, right? I mean, and so so we did push that through with the National Product Association, and we're able to get start to standardize that process. And I'd say through that, I'd say that was phase one. And then phase two was we start collaborating with the EPA as well, right?
Yeah.
And you have a lot of great work. And that's really the standard that, that is today. We've helped evolve that. We have a
Yep.
very, long and prosperous, a relationship with the EPA. And so, just our design for the environment, and our, safe products and things like that. Coming up with protocols and definitions of what that needs to be. Safer choice. We've won their Safer Choice Award for the last 5 years, for example. So, working closely with them, that's kind of been the evolution of that. But, I'd say at the same time, Ira, just from a technical standpoint, again, like, if you prompt me, I'll geek out on science as much as you want. So you have to hold me back on that. But, it was challenging there were lots of, there's things like APGs and sort of naturally derived surfactants and things like that are out there, but the reality is they don't clean very well, right? They clean, but not, to the order that people expect from like a non-ionic surfactant or LAS or something like that. And so, our whole approach, I mean, our innovation game was really like, to deliver a sustainable alternative that was a not that you didn't have to compromise, at all from a traditional product. In fact, talking with the Walmarts of the world, we were like, we don't want to be shelved in the green section. We want to be shelved next to the traditional cleaners because we're as good as them.
Right.
So like we launched a detergent, a Greenworks detergent. We're like, we want to be right next to Tide. You know what I mean? Like, and so, that was our approach going in. And, you could argue if it was the right approach or not and that sort of thing. But, so like the technology had to be there. And we filed a number of patents around, we developed some emulsion technology basically where it's like, a cocktail of 3 different natural surfactants, create a synergy better than, each of them individually, basically. And so we were able to clean like a traditional cleaner and, that pushed that product line to over 100 million in sales,
Nice.
When it was, sort of in its heyday. Around that time there, recession came, I think in 2008 and, some things like that happened. So Greenworks isn't what it was back there, but I think it was sort of a moment in time, right? Where it's like, an important part of, I think, the cleaning history and the sustainability story where, the public sort of woke up to this and said, hey, there are ways to clean just as well or to do things just as well or maybe even better with sustainable products. And, we continue to this day to, kind of fight that battle. I mean, with, our Glad trash bags, right? Which, hey, we have technology that, is, 30% less plastic is in our bags and than, the competitors, and they're stronger, right? And, how do we, continue to concentrate, our sprays and our bleach and our, products, and how do we look for alternative materials for Kingsford and things like that? Like we are still on this path and our targets are more public and more ambitious than ever in terms of science-based targets and things like that as well. And we're making progress. So, I think Greenworks is an important story, narrative in that progression. And, I think things have just gotten better since.
Absolutely. And it was a big hit in our family, I can just say. So
yeah.
Aside from the fact that it was all the science behind it is pretty cool. But
yeah.
While we're on this theme of whether we obviously the last couple of years, has really impacted all of us as consumers in terms of cleaning, sanitizing, disinfecting, whatever you want to call it, not just our external world, but the internal world as well. I know, you're through your health and wellness initiatives, you have some interesting sort of probiotics and microbiome related stuff now. Talk a little bit about how the last couple of years, per what has happened, and our interest in cleaning let's say, our microenvironment around us has impacted sort of what you do in terms of innovation in that particular niche.
Yeah, I mean, boy, it's been a whirlwind, I'd say, the last couple of years. I guess where I'd start is, when we've made some really big strides. I mean, health and wellness has always been a major trend, a major piece of the company purpose, right? And our purpose is to champion people to be well and thrive every single day, right? And that's one of the great things about being in CPG, right? I mean,
Yeah.
all us CPG heads, like, we love that because, 90% of, the Clorox company has 90% penetration, right? In US households, meaning like 9 out of 10 houses have some Clorox product, right? Like in their house, whether it be a King's for charcoal or Hidden Valley Ranch or wipes or whatever. And so we do get to touch people's everyday life, right?
Mhm.
And we consider that a tremendous honor and big responsibility. And so, you know, champion people to be well and thrive, right? Is right. So there's a big health component to that. And, I'd say, a big, we really got into that, especially in healthcare, where, we really leaned in, I'd say in the early 2000s, where, there was a lot of, hospital acquired infections happening, right? People go in for an
Yep.
operation or something, they come out more sick, right,
Right.
than they were. And so, we developed, the first, for example, C. diff, killer,
Yep.
out there, which is a bleach product and bleach wipes, and lots of technology goes into that for the stability of
Hmm.
the wovens and things. But also, followed up by our peroxide cleaners and things like that. And so, really focusing on health, through healthcare and through that channel. As we got, more recently, right, as the pandemic, occurred, it's like all of that awareness, right, like skyrocketed,
Yep.
not only in, the hospitals and things, but, in people's homes. Right now, people in homes want it, more coverage, easier ways to disinfect, more efficacious cleaning and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And capacity was a problem, right? Um, and so, just stepping back, I mean, we were, as that was happening, it was like, hey, we need to continue to innovate in, different, bioactive materials, different forms, different, deliveries, right? Like, we have an electrostatic sprayer, for example, that
Hmm.
is used in hospitals. We have a UV product that's used in hospitals. Should we be considering these for, in home, right?
Yep.
Where you can just walk into your bathroom and you spray this thing, and it's electrostatic, micro spray. So it goes underneath your sink. I mean, it goes everywhere, and so you're disinfecting very simply and that sort of thing. Are people ready for that in their homes, for example? Are people ready for, turn on your UV when you go to bed and come in down the morning and your house is,
Yep.
um, so, and as we were exploring those things like that, so, what we found was consumer sentiment changing pretty quickly in terms of, maybe there's some fatigue in terms of disinfection.
Hmm.
Maybe there's some, boy, like, we want, let the good times roll a little bit, these sort of things. And what we found is, and we're still sort of working through this, right, is more about like, hey, people want, yes, they want to be safe, they want health, but they also want, you know, time away from drudgery. They want it to be a little bit more, I don't want to say enjoyable, but,
Hmm.
you know, um, make the experience a little bit more pleasurable, make it a little
Right.
bit easier, but, also be effective. And so, like, our product line, like our Scentiva product line, right, is something that's more approachable. It still disinfects, it still cleans, but, it also provides a great fragrance experience. It's colorful, it's more fun, and we find that consumers are looking a little bit more for, less like, super effective and things like that, more like approachable, safe, like easy, less drama.
Hmm. Hmm.
um, and so, our lines like Scentiva, we just launched a free and clear platform that is, it's organic acids, based, so very,
Yep.
very family friendly, very, these sort of things. And so, we're starting to see that, like, as an innovator, as a, especially in today's world, it's like we have to be ready to pivot, right? And if as I always tell my organization, if I'm telling you to pivot, it's probably too late, right? Like we need to be like all over it and have the right sensing out there and that sort of thing. And so we, we are, pivoting. I mean, a year and a half ago, we had a very different innovation plan, right? Because the consumer was in a different space, how quickly things change, and we need to be right on top of it. And that's the game that we play these days. And it's great.
Yeah. Well, how does that? You talk a little bit about that, like, and because you oversee sort of this open innovation process, and there's a part of the website. I can go there, and here I am, Ira Pastor, inventor, and I have Compound X that I'd like to get into some Clorox products. How does the process work? What gets you personally excited in terms of some of these innovation segments? What gets me into your office? What gets me kicked out of your office? Talk a little bit about that, if you would, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, what I'd say is nothing gets you kicked out of my office. In fact, I don't even have an office.
So, get kicked out of the cubicle.
I don't even have it. So we have open neighborhoods, right, at Clorox, including our CEO, including our, including myself and everyone. So so I sit among scientists. I sit in a different, building most, I try to move around. Again, like, as I like to say, I've had all the jobs, right? So I know all the different, neighborhoods and people and challenges and things like that. And so I try to be an enabler to that. I think that the more and more, I think what everyone sort of understands at this point, in Clorox and probably outside of Clorox as well, is just like, it really takes a village, right? To be successful, to I'd say what gets you kicked out of my proverbial office is if you come to me with an idea that you haven't connected with anybody else on. So if you're like, I have an idea that I thought of and I want to run it by you, I'm like, have you run it by like 2 or 3 people? Not because it needs to sort of go through those like a stage gate process, but more because like I want because ideas need to be built upon. They just can't, they're not where they need to be, if it's just one person doing it, right? And so I'm a huge believer in diversity, for diversity for a lot of reasons, but like innovation, you're only as good as your diversity. And so if someone comes up with a great idea and say, I had a great idea, I'm like, have you run it by 2 or 3 people, right, to help you build it even more, right? And because that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to help you build it. And, I want you to be thinking about it and networking before you bring it to me. And so, so that's really our approach at Clorox. I mean, of course we're cross-functional, but, I always, tell people, Ira, like, if you and I brainstormed, you and I would come up with, 10 great ideas. And if we kept brainstorming, it would be subtleties of those 10 great ideas, that we'd, but if we brought in someone from Buenos Aires, or we brought in someone from, not from the Philly area like you and I are, but maybe from Florida or from Texas, or someone from another, or, different race, or, bring a woman, because we're both men, different sexual orientation, right? All of a sudden, we're going to have a whole different set of ideas, right? Just because we've introduced one extra set of diversity in it. And so, so all ideas, that kind of like, it takes a village mentality. It takes a diverse village to get to the best ideas, is really how we roll at Clorox.
Excellent. While we're on this theme, Michael, I one of the things was kind of interesting. A couple of months ago, Clorox announced this. It was like a $500 million digital transformation initiative, and I was interested again because been talking to a lot of people. I come out of the pharma industry, been talking to a lot of people in pharma lately, and themes like artificial AI is obviously very hot, but digital health and sort of digital companion products to our life sciences products. Anything exciting happening on your front in terms of whether it's AI or digitalization or whatever, and ultimately how that impacts the innovation process of Clorox?
Man, Ira, I mean, if you ask me what I'm most excited about right now in innovation, it's it is this digital revolution, right? It is digitizing innovation. It is integrating AI into it. And it's something, as part of this, $500 million dollar investment in Clorox, like that's a big part of what we're doing. So we've always had, systems in place, of course, and things like that. But this is really about, you know, um, again, I've been around for a while, as I like, again, I've had all the jobs, and so you know, right, like, we used to, brainstorm in a room, and you put the stickums on the wall, and try to, organize them around themes, and then 3 weeks later, you bring in consumers, and you have some prototypes, and you get them to react and stuff like that. Like that whole process is now digitized, right? And so, right, like how do and it's not 13 consumers or a class AI hut, which is 200 consumers. It's 1,000 consumers. It's 100,000 consumers in days. If you can get the digital piece of this right, and you can prototype digitally, right, as opposed to physically, right, there's just a lot of it's really a sort of a golden age, in terms of the innovation potential of what can happen compared to what we were doing back in the day. So and that's not even taking into consideration just the sensing capabilities and the searching capabilities and the and using AI to help you understand those. I mean, we all get alerts and do all these things, but like, what do you do with them? And how do you all these trends, and like, what do you do with all this information? And that's where AI can really help in terms of sorting it and putting it in the right buckets, and focusing it on the right initiatives and things like that. So it's exciting. There's a lot to do in this space. There's a lot of, it's changing every day, the digital world and things like that. But it's really something I think is gonna, change the industry.
Outstanding. Mike, one other thing is, I mentioned in your bio at the beginning, throughout your time at the company, you also served as the chief sustainability officer of the organization, and another really interesting piece of press was your recent 12-year 47 megawatt power purchase agreement, going sort of all in on 100% renewables, US, Canada. This ESG thing is no joke for you at Clorox. Talk a little bit about this, if you would, because I think this is really, the rubber meeting the road in terms of sustainability and climate change and so forth.
Yes. We have signed up, sustainability. I mean, it's we're a California-based company. Right. Again, we're a purpose-driven company. We're a do the right thing type of company. We're people, a human-centered company. And so sustainability has always been, an important statement for us, for a number of reasons. But, and so we've been at this for 20 years for more. I mean, Greenworks being an example back in 2008 or 6 or whatever. But what I'd say is we have definitely, as many companies like the Unilevers of the world and some of our peers, we've really raised the bar in terms of what we want to do with going to the Science-Based Target Initiative. And so we have a number of, we are, right? It's classified as scope one and, scope one, scope two, scope three, different types of requirements to be part of the Science-Based Initiative program, which is a UN sponsored program. Not sure how much you know about it or if you're an expert in it, but
Not an expert, but I heard of it.
it's pretty daunting. We really need to, change the whole complexion of the company and our products in a lot of ways. So, we're talking about, twice the amount of, recycled material. We're talking about 50% less packaging. We're talking about, taking our footprint down, significantly, our carbon footprint, things like that. So there's a lot of signature goals we have. And so, what I'd say is we're ahead on a lot of them in terms of, our scope one and scope two is really about your personal footprint, right? So what do we do at our plants and in our, and so we're about 70%, 70%, for example, waste to landfill, so 70% of our facilities have zero waste to landfill. Okay, which means no waste is leaving that place that's going to landfill. We want to get by 100%. We want to get to 100% by 2025. So we're almost there. We're 100% renewable energy, to your point, right? So all these are goals that we're ahead of and that we're spending money on and that we're reconfiguring ourselves right around. But we have a lot of work to do because scope three is really about, and this is the cool part about the science-based targets, is scope three is about the material that you receive and the material that leaves your plants, right? So we're responsible for the carbon footprint of the surfactants that we purchase from Stepan, for example.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Or from Dow.
Okay.
So it's really a change. So we're all dependent on each other, right? And so, but it also extends to Walmart. So Walmart is looking at their footprint, but they're responsible for the products that we sell them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's totally a cool, everyone's dependent on each other. So we need to go back and we need to talk to the Dows of the world and the Stepans of the world and the BSFs of the world and say, hey, these surfactants are taking too much energy, their footprint isn't right. Either you change it or we're going to have to find, a different alternative. And so, we're working on our third party, basically footprints because that impacts us directly. So it takes a lot of partnership, a lot of coordination, a lot of top to top discussions. If everything was under our control, it would be so much easier. But a lot of this is influencing our partners. And so, so it's a labor of love and it's something that we have, I'd say the key for us is that when we formed, when we first came out with these goals, Ira, we formed what we called a sustainability center, right? Which was, which at the time I led, and which was a cross-functional team that translated these goals into actionable plans for each BU, right? So it was right, because they're pretty daunting if you're oh my gosh, we have to cut our packaging in half. But it's hey, this is what this means for cleaning. This is what it means for Brita. This is what it means for, right? So we, basically sort of, when we walked down the hall, everybody was sort of like this. Because, we were coming with the news. Here, and it was a top-down approach. So it wasn't it was look, you got to deliver, your top line growth, your profit, and here's your sustainability roadmap that you need to deliver too. And so this is a top-down approach. It's not and so we had that sustainability center that we called it for 2 years to get all those efforts moving, to get it all very, to drive clarity for the organization, that sort of thing. Now the sustainability work, all the things that we've talked about is part of each business strategy and part of each business, metrics and deliverables.
Outstanding. Really outstanding. Michael, you clearly from the discussion we've had, you've been spending obviously the last couple of decades thinking quite a bit about Clorox. But you do other things. As mentioned, you volunteer per the Boys and Girls Club of Oakland. You coach Pop Warner football. Talk a little bit about that and some of the other stuff that you're involved in when you're not thinking about Clorox or your immediate family.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I feel like you know, those community, my involvement in the community is almost my day job. And I or it's really my passion, Ira. And my wife and I are both very involved in the Oakland community. We have been living here for 26, 27 years. Our kids both went to through the public school system in Oakland. We both, I work for an Oakland-based company. We go to church in Oakland. I mean, so we're Oakland people. We love the diversity of Oakland. We love, what it's done for our family. And Oakland's we call it the town, right? I mean, it's a
Mhm.
special, it's, everyone's sort of connected in some way, which is great. And, I always, I love sports. And so I always coached my kids' teams, my son and my daughter. And so growing up, I was always coaching them. And I just, I get so much out of that. And that's another great connection point into the community and things like that. You just get to know so many people. And to make a long story short, like my son, played, it was soccer and, all kinds of things. But, ultimately football is, what he loved. And I grew up playing Pop Warner football too. So, we got involved in East Bay Warriors, West Oakland based team. And, I coached him there. And ultimately, he went on to high school to do things. And I was like, my son was my youngest, my daughter was already in high school. And I was like, is that it? Is my coaching career done? Like this is such a part of me. I've been doing it for 10 years or something. And so I decided to stay on. And so I kept coaching. And, the East Bay Warriors, our youth football team is like, is nationally ranked. I mean, we're ranked fourth in the nation. We usually win the Northwest, and we go to the Pop Warner Super Bowl in Florida, where the top 8 teams in the nation compete on ESPN2 and all kinds of things. And so I've been doing this for like 15 years now. And it's just, this year I'm coaching, 11U. And West Oakland is one of the most impoverished, areas, on
Mhm.
the West Coast. And a mentorship is needed. Investment is needed. And so, I love investing my time in the kids, and through football is how I got involved in the Boys and Girls Club, because a lot of the kids are involved there, and we have meetings there, or on rainy days we go there and that sort of thing. So I got involved in the Boys and Girls Club. I love how it's run. I love, the CEO, Cal Stanley. And so, eventually I got on the board there, and now I'm the board chair. But just, it's all sort of interconnected around
Right.
this, Oakland investment in kids. And just, I just, have so much, passion, and I'm so motivated to, continue the work there, and make them know how special they are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, I wanted to loop back to you. Obviously, this is a story about you and your journey, and not just what you've been doing, but the things you continue to think about and positively impact the world around you. And it's a great story, Michael. And I appreciate you sharing it with us. I wish you the best for everything you're doing, both outside of Clorox and obviously as you continue to lead R&D innovation and create these new products for all of us. Really great story. Um, for everybody that's going to be listening to this particular episode of our show across the podcast networks or watching on the YouTube channel, again, you've been spending time with Dr. Michael Ott, Senior Vice President and Chief Research and Development Officer of the Clorox Company. Michael, again, thank you for taking the time out to talk to us for a little while about these topics. Obviously, thank you for everything you do. And as we like to say here on our show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow via what you do. Really great story.
Thanks, Ira. My pleasure. It's been a lot of fun.
Great having you.